Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dissolving the Divide. Really happy and excited to have our guest today. Her name is Jaymee J. We'll get to her in just a moment. Hey, Derek, how are you doing there in
Oh,
France?
Leslie, hey.
So far
Pretty
away.
good. A little weather beaten, but still ticking and clicking, and things are even more better than finger licking without the chicken because I'm a little vegetarian, not vegan anymore. It's the same thing, but it's a different terminology, and that's another topic for another discussion for another night. But Jaymee J or Jaymee JJ, how are you today, Day?
I'm
Bonjour.
good.
First time talking with you. I had it was cool checking you out with my friend and colleague, Crip Rick. You have a lot of experience in weight showing and research that we're really interested to just let you have the table and, speak what you got to say about, this really, hard hitting subject that people should really
Yeah.
be paying more attention to because the elephant in the room used to be small, but it's getting bigger and bigger, and people really need to pay attention to this and realize,
Yeah.
how this matters to a lot of people, even
Yeah.
if you're not personally affected by it. So,
Yeah. So Jaymee J, I've been following your work for a bit. Really appreciate the depth of your knowledge, the passion that you have. And I'm going to have you introduce a little bit about yourself, but in just short form, you're a social worker who has been delving into trauma-based mind control and satanic ritual abuse and expanding that to the forces of evil that are really affecting all of us. So share with us, please, a little about your background and what got you into this study.
Yeah, sorry. I just right off the top, I'm a extremely introverted and a loner, and I actually it's really hard for me to be a public person or talk about myself, which is kind of the opposite of most people that enjoy podcasting. But because I'm so passionate to share this information, I do it, but it is hard for me to talk about myself. But anyways, just kind of a brief background. I have a really broad background. Like I've worked a lot of different places. I've been in the military. I've taken a lot of different like training and courses, and I just consider myself a real generalist. And also in my research, I consider myself a real generalist. And I just have a really kind of inquisitive, like minded that with search for knowledge that's just been there since I was a kid. I've always been an avid reader and I just can't get enough information. It's just the way I've kind of was born. And so yeah, I've really spent a little bit of time in a lot of things, which I think maybe can be a asset or a deficit, like depending, it has pros and cons to it. But yeah, my life, and I've just been a natural, like sensitive, empathic, person, born that way too. So I've always had a heart for the injustice in the world and oppression and social issues. And, so going into school, I was kind of really drawn into like sociology and just, why is the world the way it is? And why is it so dysfunctional? And, even as a child, I remember just looking around at the adults and thinking like so many of these problems are just socially constructed and unnecessary. And everybody's just going along with it. And it just made no sense to me as a kid why we're functioning at this really in a system that seemed like most people are being traumatized rather than benefiting, and a small group is benefiting, but most people are not, happy working a full-time job and being stressed and paying more. Like it's just the way that it's set up is really not beneficial to human health. And I saw that really young. And then yeah, through my research, like I said, I got in my university, I learned like kind of a base level about trauma and stuff, but really I did not learn very much in school at all. And I became an autodidact. And when I got out of school, I actually had to unlearn a lot of the BS that they indoctrinated me into, because like I said, I was working in a lot of organizations believing that I was being a do-gooder and helping, and really got to a point where I realized that I'm actually working to keep a system in place by kind of being a band-aider, and keeping this system in place, and kind of these nonprofit organizations that appear to be really altruistic on the surface really were not. And so that really started to become apparent to me after just working in a lot of them. And then yeah, I did land on Mark Passio's work, and I actually just devoured it. Like I was living in an RV at the time, which I thought that's another story for another time. But anyways, I literally became that person in an RV, like listening to like podcasts, and I listened to every single one of his shows like all in a row. Like I just consumed the entire body of knowledge all like within a couple, like I think within a month I had it all down.
Wow.
Um, So I learned a lot from that. And then, yeah, just really when I started learning about the satanic ritual abuse and trauma-based mind control, like I said, I just viscerally, spiritually felt like that was my calling. This is the most important thing. This is what I need to learn, and this is what I need to help teach people about. And this is, to me, I really am passionate to teach about it because I think it's the most important thing. And I think if people don't understand the dissociation and how there's another level of subliminal reality where the manipulation is actually taking place, I think people are becoming really aware of the surface evil, but that's in the field of effects, right? So it's like if people can understand like how it's working, through individuals, through trauma and through dissociation, then it will make a lot more sense why humans are being part of an anti-human agenda when they are human, like, because that's very irrational, right? And so the only way that it makes sense is to understand the fragmentation of the people involved in this agenda. And so I'm very passionate to teach people anything about this because I think it is the missing key. And I think that survivors of this abuse are also all very special missing keys that all fit together like a puzzle with pieces that none of us would ever have that they have. And I feel like their voices are one of the most important voices to listen to right now. So I always try to be an advocate for them as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah, it's a deep topic, and it's a lot of difficult information within this. So it can be triggering to people for sure. And just want to encourage people to hang in there and just be open to this topic and to all the information that you share. Can you quickly define what is trauma-based mind control?
So I like the way that I think of it is it's very strategic abuse based on science that's done deliberately to have a specific outcome. So sometimes I just refer to ritual abuse as strategic abuse because a lot of abuse in relationships, I mean, it always comes down to power and control, but a lot of it's like unconscious or just dysfunction. But when it's done like strategically for a specific outcome with a scientific method, then that is the trauma-based mind control. Because something that I think is also really important is to understand that it is about power and control. And so, like I was talking before the show about, people are trying to understand the child trafficking and the pedophilia, but I think the part that they're missing is that it's done strategically, like to induce things like Stockholm syndrome and to induce things like learned helplessness. And that's really a power control, like especially when it's done on an industrial level, like through the MK Ultra programs, through the churches, through residential schools, which I want to do a whole show on that sometime because I really believe that there was an element of trauma-based mind control with the residential school system. And I just think that's probably like a really basic definition of what it is. It's very strategic. It's very scientific.
And how does that differ, or where does the satanic ritual abuse fit into the general topic of trauma-based?
Right. So there's kind of different schools of thought, and this is actually just another divide where we kind of have the scientific, clinical, psychology that you learn in school, where it's going to be a lot of, giving medications because they're going to say it's, genetic or biological or chemical or, this kind of scientific framework for putting this trauma into, which is happening more and more, like as they put kind of everything under the medical umbrella, including all the social services in Canada anyways. I'm not sure how it is in the States, but they've kind of like, the health authority is just like a big fish that just ate all the social work. Like it's all addiction and mental health is under the health authority now. So which kind of used to be a little bit of separation, but anyways, sorry, what was the question?
So the difference, where does satanic ritual abuse fit into the general topic of trauma-based mind control?
Right. So satanic ritual abuse is one of the major themes for trauma-based mind control. And there's people have different thoughts. Like people are aware and believe of entities and demons, and that is part of what is going on with this trauma, because trauma actually opens up like interdimensional portals for demonic attachment. And so that's a whole kind of area one you can go into, or you can just look at it all scientifically and clinically. And so there's kind of two branches where some, people that are understand the spiritual stuff can see it both ways, and then there's kind of the clinical side who think that that's like just constructs. And so I'm pretty familiar with both, and I feel like we need to actually eliminate that divide, because I feel like whatever framework you're going to look at the end of the day, it actually doesn't even matter, because this stuff scares the hell out of kids either way. So it's going to be just as effective whether it is or not. And so trying to get stuck on whether you believe in demons or not, like I can guarantee you that a little 4-year-old kid believes in demons when they're being traumatized and told it's like a demon. So it doesn't matter either way. And a lot of the people that do it, like people like, you know, Michael Aquino or Joseph Mengele and stuff, like they, like some of them believe that they are accessing like archetypes and entities and stuff. And then when they're training other people to do it, people are saying, oh, this is ridiculous. We don't need all this theatrics. We can just use VR and drugs and trauma. We don't need to do all this theatrics. But they always say that it's the most effective one, because there are archetypes in the mind, and like just how everyone's scared of snakes and spiders, people are scared of demons and evil and Satan and stuff too. So like, especially kids. So they always use a base of Satanism when they're doing this trauma. So it's like, I just don't want people to get stuck on what their beliefs around that kind of stuff is, because it works either way.
Yeah, I really appreciate that.
And we could define, you know, what Satanism really is, and demystify this whole idea of those things, and like, oh, demons and all that stuff. And like, Jaymee, I think where you're coming from is where I'm kind of, I don't like to assume, but, you know, thinking that, you know, it has no religious base of what you're, you know, coming from. It's more of, you know, these lower or higher astral entities that are just looking to cling on to human life force energy and loose that out, which is a lot of reason why there's these ritual, you know, sacrifices, and there's a lot of time and effort and focus put into them, and certain words and tones being evoked. And
right.
that's another subject, like you said, to delve into. Not like we're being taboo about it, but it's great to just clarify and just like demystify these things, because, you know, like to be more streetwise in a spiritual sense, and recognize that, like, okay, we have to understand the whole spectrum of things to be aware of these things and break the fear, no matter what your age is. Even if you're exposed to listening to something like this when you're, you know, less than 10 years old, like, you know, a certain child of a certain Levolution family that we had the pleasure of having on our show before. But yeah, word up to Sebastian. But yeah, anyways, Leslie, do you have anything to say? Yeah.
So I think, you know, you mentioned that ultimately there's an agenda of power and control, and a way of using or preying upon children, especially from like a predator to prey, and that there's a use of some science in doing this. So I'd like to hear more about how science is fitting in to this process.
Right. So depending on what people's beliefs are about the beginning of time, like there's always been this dynamic being played out through humans where like a group of people knows how to like use trauma and force and whatever to get other people to manipulate their will. Like that's been going on since the beginning of time. And so there's like societies and groups that have, you know, worked together to do this, to kind of come to the top of a pyramid in society, like all through history, right? Like whatever those groups are. But really in World War II, it was really Joseph Mengele that really had unlimited test subjects and did all his twin studies and like torture studies. And they really were able to mechanize this abuse down to like exactly how many volts, how many seconds to hold the head underwater, how many, like exactly what age to do stuff in. Like, and also, although people like to believe that all psychology and psychiatry research was done to help humanity and help mental health, most of it was actually pretty evil research. Like if you look at the dark history of psychiatry, like most research on humans was done for power and control and how to manipulate, and like a lot of torture research, or like, you know, I always say when you go to school and you're reading a textbook, they always seem to have all this research on like feral children, or, you know, but they never really say like, where was this feral child and where did they come from? Where was this experiment? It's always just left out of the books, right? It's kind of whitewashed. And anyway, so the Nazis really were very interested in this stuff. They were very, very interested in, and Heinrich Himmler as well, from the SS was very interested in sexual abuse and intergenerational sexual abuse and the way that it affected the mind. And so they did a lot of research on this, and they had unlimited test subjects, and they're psychopaths with no content. So they had no ethical, this research was not ethical. However, they really perfected how to do this. And then Mengele, after World War II, went into South America and to the United States and to Canada as well, and trained trainers and military trainers. And so this technology was really a highly paid for technology that many groups that wanted to have power, including military, CIA, governments, mafia, like a lot of groups really want to know how to do this. And you can read the book Hypnosis by Estabrook that was written just prior to World War, I think it was in 43 or something, talking about how they could make spies that wouldn't even be aware of their own, like that would be fragmented from themselves, and they could just be like a tape recorder, and they could, be put under torture, and they would never confess anything because they had no conscious knowledge of things. And so they were already aware of this technology, like during the war, and after the war, they really went and sold this technology to groups who paid very, very highly for learning how to do this. And so, yeah, it's been going on really like clockwork since that time. And a lot of the research is shared amongst secret groups that share this research. There is manuals and books and stuff that people have had access to, secret libraries, like where this technology has really been perfected. And so some of it's really physical trauma, but a lot of it is actually relationship trauma and betrayal trauma and attachment disorder that comes from those things is really a big key to it as well. It's not all just electrocution and physical torture and stuff. It's really the psychological, emotional trauma that really actually is, I would say, more damaging and like to do because it's usually authority figures, parental figures. And that's really why it's intergenerational, because they basically need that betrayal of somebody you trust or think is a protector to be a predator. And that's really what really does it, is that complete contradiction and inversion of the way that humans are meant to function. So yeah, it's been going on, I think, since clockwork. And I think, I don't know all the exact dates, but I think since World War II, they really started doing it on more of an industrial level, where they were like taking a certain group of children like out of the gifted programs or taking them like out of daycares. And I know people think that's a conspiracy theory, but if people do their research, there's lots of information there that really shows that they were not just doing it generationally on their own families, but also taking certain little samples out of the public and traumatizing them and then monitoring them like through kind of the gifted programs and stuff.
Foster care maybe too.
Oh yeah,
look up
sure.
all the CIA
Yeah.
operations, MK Ultra and MK whatever, right? There's a lot of different ones. So yeah.
So the technologies include just, physical torture and pain and terror, inducing terror, relational betrayals and destruction of attachments and trust and bonds. And then putting people in like catch-22s and impossible choices and like psychologically shame-inducing, identity dilemmas, I guess. And
yes.
And then also, things like I've heard like harmonic sound waves and other types of things, which I'm not that familiar with, but there's like multiple angles at which people are stressed, and to the point where there's a fragmentation. And you mentioned about the fragmentation of consciousness being an important element of, I guess, like breaking people enough to control them. Can you share more about that?
Right. So one of the ways I kind of explained it before is that there is no will if there's no self. And so kind of the occult aspect of this is basically that this really only works really effectively if you do it to children as they're being formed, because they don't get a chance to form normally. So they intercede during the creative developmental stages of children when they're developing self, which is before the age of 7, right? So if they come in and do all this trauma before that time, the mind actually forms in a way that is multiple and fragmented, and it's never not been fragmented because it was forming. So that's really why they do it to children, because that person can't really go back to a state that they never were in the first place. They can do a lot of similar things on adults, and they can do quite a bit, but it's never going to be like a perfect execution of what they're trying to do unless they do it really young too, like even in vitro, right? Sorry, what was the question?
It's all right, Jaymee. Yeah, I know.
Like,
yeah, just trying to understand how the fragmentation occurs and why that's such an important element to this.
Yeah,
to the-
Jaymee, because you know, but we had a pre-talk before this recording, and yeah, what you mentioned was great. I was going to be like, hey, save it for the podcast, but just how like the intergenerational or like generational trauma in general on a micro or macro scale has just like fractaled out through this fragmentation, and things have been just getting worse and even more polarized, and just like the healing needs to be that much more profound through the generations of any given family, if you will, or whatever, you know, group, tribe, what, you know, right? So yeah, does that
right.
kind of
Yeah.
bring back to what you're
Yeah, so it has to really do with like occult aspects, like having a will and the care, and like this kind of, so really really what they're doing is taking another person and using them as a conduit for their own will before they can develop a will of their own. And so this really is dark magic, and this really is like satanic in the fact that it's just pure taking by force. Like it's so there's kind of levels of dark occultism where some of them are a suggestion, like some witchcraft and stuff may be like an offer that you accept of your own will, like I don't know, like a shot or something, right? Like it's not, it's there's an element of consent that's offered. Even under duress or manipulation, there's still an act of compliance, where pure Satanism is just taking by force. And a lot of dark occultists don't even really want to be that, because they know there's karmic consequences to that. So they would rather get you to do it voluntarily than have to do it by force. Force is actually their last resort, because they know there's actual consequences for just using like extreme violence or force. Like they know they'll pay for it in some other way. So the more they can do it like with force or without force, the better for them, is really like how they look at it. And so the kind of dark aspect of this is that they're basically taking another human being and making them an extension of their will. And it's just so evil, because it's taking of an innocent child before it has a chance to even consent or resist, right? So it really is the ultimate evil, like in my opinion, on every level, like against natural law, like of an individual not being able to establish, even have a chance to establish a will. Like that's really the only way they're able to do it. So this fragmentation, I mean, and they're doing it to everybody on a level, right? Like, and so also like children are pure and more psychic and closer to God in their imaginations, and their emotions are really intense for magical purposes. So if they can usurp children and use them as an extension of their will, it's a very powerful way to put forth your intention, like as a sorcerer into the quantum field. Because like if you scare a little kid so bad that they never want to be found, that psychic energy the child's putting out of pure terror to hide, like that's way more powerful than some psychopath could do himself, like because he doesn't even have access to all that emotional body, right? So they have to use these children as conduits for like to put their will into the quantum field. And you're right, Derek, I'm glad you mentioned like about it affecting all of us, because what is happening to the children, like especially when they do it like on ley lines and like doing it with virtual reality right now, where it's perfectly replicated, like not only through time but through space, like fractally. And so doing that through children, it actually like we're all kind of feeling like a sickness, right? Like we just feel this, like I don't know, I feel it, like I can literally feel just like a sick energy on the planet. And I think a lot of empathic people are. I think a lot of people that are committing suicide and stuff are really those people that are not like not able to endure that anymore.
Like the harmonics are distorted.
Sorry?
The harmonics are distorted.
Yes,
on a frequency level.
And so, yeah, and so we need like these empathic people to be placeholders on the planet. Like if they keep going, then it's not gonna be a good balance, right? But it's like they are the ones really suffering. Like the less psychopathic somebody is, really the more they're suffering at this point, right? Like feeling all of it.
Yes, yes. So there's a fracturing, an intentional fracturing that's targeting children, especially the younger that children's minds are split, that the more suffering that they have, the less they develop a self, and then they're more easy to control, right? And then that can separate from other relationships because no relationship becomes safe in that case.
Right.
And then if we're going to be, having children, then the parenting bond is disrupted, intergenerational trauma repeats, so it expands out.
Trauma
Right.
bonds
Yeah.
with the next
Yeah.
relationships and all that stuff. Yeah.
And
yeah, and a lot of
Unfortunately, yeah.
people that do the harm and evil, they're also very fragmented too. And like human beings have shut off valves. Like you can only feel so shameful before you just don't feel any shame and you're shameless. Like because it'll just get, it's like that's how dissociation works, is like you can torture somebody, whether it's physical, spiritual, emotional, psychological. The human being will take so much and then it just shuts off and starts a new page. And so even with abusers, like they deep down are very shameful, like narcissists and psychopaths are very shameful, but they're to the point where they actually shut it off, right? And so that's how they're able to go in and do the abuse, like because if they ever actually like were self-reflective of how shameful what they were doing, like that would actually shatter them, like so they're always like not even going, they're remaining fractured from themselves to even realize.
right.
And that's how they can keep being abusers too. So there's like a chain of fragmentation that just starts to self-replicate like a virus, really. Like it's
Yeah, well said. I think it's important to like clarify that this is a natural part of human like anatomy, so to speak, that this way of responding to trauma and prolonged stress leads to internal compartmentalization for all of us. We all experience it to some degree just to function in the world, like to get up and go to work, maybe after you had an argument with your spouse or your child's acting up and you got to turn that off to be able to go and be a worker, right? So there's an aspect where I think our physiology was designed for this to be an adaptation, right? To be a strength, but this has been exploited through the knowledge to intentionally split people in much more extreme ways. And Right. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think in our I think our culture promotes it.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it totally promotes it, exploits it, and you were telling us earlier before our recording that you've been exploited yourself, as have I and Leslie, I'm sure. But the key word you said was, like your empathy and things like that, and like not just you, but so many people in that field of work of trying to like be a social worker or help people heal, whatever. It's been weaponized against yourself and others. And I don't know if you want to touch on that, because it just extends from how many decades of this type of institutionalized almost inversion of how it should really be holistically, if you will. But
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because sometimes like I just like to put good and evil in really basic kind of diagrams or whatever. Like good and God is whole, right? Like it's alpha, omega, it's whole, it's everything, it's omniscient, omnipresent. Like it's not fractured. So the way that evil is working is to fracture, right? And so a lot of evil, I would say all evil only can work out of context. And so context is a really key word, because people can do like the craziest things under certain contexts. Like, I mean, even sometimes like I said, like, it's kind of funny, like going to the doctor sometimes when like you would like strip down and let somebody inside your body, like where it's like, that is like something you would not do, but because it's in a medical office and because there's a sheet and like, so you've gone through this kind of ritual of like, okay, well, in this context, this is not weird, right? Like to let a stranger, like, you know what I mean? Like, and that's just one example, but I mean, like any type of activity can be construed into a context. And so a lot of these people that are even abusing children and stuff, like they have a very twisted framework in their mind where they, in that specific context, they could do it. And if you read the book The Protein Self by James Lipton, he talks about the splitting of Nazis, like how a lot of them would just go home and be like good dads and hang out with their kids, and then they would really compartmentalize and go to work. And so the only way that we can really do evil is out of context and through compartmentalization. And like when you look at how our whole society is set up with bureaucracy and structure and hierarchy, and all of these things are to create compartmentalization and take things out of context, so that we're all like, you know, little parts of the machine, not holistically looking at what we're contributing to. And I was saying, like, for me personally, working in all these nonprofits and kind of being this like heart worker and being altruistic and, you know, kind of, you know, just being like, you know, working for low wage just to make a difference, and all these kind of virtuous, you know, motivations, which are things I don't want to change about myself. But at the same time, you get a little bit older and you think, wait a second, there's another level to this here. Like where really, and I have to give David Whitehead credit, because he really said this to me, and it just kind of was like a bat upside the head for me. Like it was so personal when he said your virtues being used against you. And I just kind of sat on that and meditated, and I was like ding, like I was like, this is my major issue in life. Like how you know, being a caring, empathic, or even an altruistic person can really be weaponized. And if you look at kind of like the events over the last couple of years, like everybody thinks they're acting from virtue. Everybody thinks they're doing something for the right reason. Even people that are like extremely selfish or like de facto Satanists, like they think it's a pure like righteous thing to like do your true will, or like they have these ideas in their head that somehow seem like it's a virtue to do whatever they do. And you can always kind of rationalize your drives with some type of a context to make it seem virtuous, even to lie to yourself to justify doing it.
Right. That's, yeah, what an important kind of share about what the importance of being guided by principles, right, and natural law. That if ultimately, because, you know, if we're following morality from a principle-based natural law perspective, then that keeps us on the straight and narrow and helps to protect us against the manipulation and the warping and the taking out of context and the storylines, right? And that we can fall prey to, you know, by kind of like a group pressure, you know, like even like things that happen in schools where, you know, it becomes sort of okay, so to speak, in quotes, to like take kids' own personal belongings, or to search them, you know, their bodies and things. That we see, like, again, context, but yet I think it's important to question, is it really okay to do certain things to people just because it's like culturally being considered okay? Yeah. So what are the different, if you were to sort of describe the different strategies that are being used against the populace, what are some of those?
Yeah, I mean, so MK Ultra in its you know, personal form is extreme trauma, abuse, and just a complete decimation of, like, just a soul murder of children. It's the worst thing you can ever research, or like it's the lowest. It's pure evil, 100% pure evil. And then it kind of goes up from there. So, this is really important to remember, that the reason they're doing this is because they're creating an army of slaves. And so, in my opinion, another really simple way to define good and evil is freedom and slavery, right? And so there's always these two opposing forces of people trying to consume others and make them an extension of their will, and people that just want to be left alone and be free. And so that's always being played out as well. And so when they're doing that, like, so they're kind of, the reason they're doing the trauma-based mind control, they rather than finding people and recruiting them, they're creating them from birth to be what they want them to be. So it's like, when you look at Hollywood and stuff, like, there may have been the odd person that got a role in a movie, you know, because their parents drove them down to Hollywood and they got an interview or whatever. But most people, like, I think between the 50s and the 80s, like they really started kind of manufacturing people to be exactly what they need them to be and placing them wherever they need to place them. And there's just a huge campaign of infiltration. And so they've set their slaves everywhere. And we have to remember that these slaves are dissociative to themselves. And that's why they're perfect slaves, because when somebody comes in and activates them, they are also regressed because they're out of context from themselves, even emotionally. So like when you look at like somebody like a politician or something, like when they go in and take their orders, it's like a little 5-year-old kid getting told what to do by their dad that they're terrified of, right? And so that's why they go and do it. Like, so that's why we need to look at these people differently. Like, we're not dealing with a whole human being with all their capacities, because when people are fractured, they're also stuck in time. So it's like they're different. It's like those little dolls, those Russian dolls. Like, it's like that's kind of what we're dealing with. The outside doll, we have to understand there's all these little dolls inside of them too. So that's why they have an army of slaves that they've been strategically placing like as a huge agenda and working in concert, selling this technology. There's different factions of secret societies, but there's cross infiltration and there's kind of a conditional loyalty between groups as well. So they kind of work together to a level, but all of them kind of want to throw the other one on a bus and be a top. And so it's like, you know, there's, it's hard to say exactly who these groups are, but they have worked together. Sorry?
I was going to ask you, like, who are you referring to as they? Because, yeah, we're talking about the quote unquote elites or the puppet masters and the social engineers and those people that are, you know, influencing all these mind control tactics, which is, you know, one of the modus operandi or like end goals of what they've already accomplished. I mean, it works like an autonomous machine at this point, because a lot of people are just cogs up in the machine, up in the matrix. And it makes sense when you know, kind of look at things through the lens of where they're coming from and see how it's just easy for them to play this chessboard on the checkered board of duality, black and white, whatever, all these pits of division, and to have more precision on, you know, what they're building is, you know, us, the workers that are just like, the mind control is for us to build the reality that they want.
Yes.
Not what we want. We're not the co-creators of our own reality on the micro or macrocosm of the majority of people in this world, unfortunately.
No, you have to be conscious for that. So when people are creating unconsciously, that's what I mean, even about somebody going in and thinking they're doing good, is creating that evil unconsciously, like because they're actually not aware, because their actions are out of context. And so there's a lot of these groups, but I think I mentioned it like in my little clip by Parliament, where I was talking about a sadomasochistic relationship, how people think it's the dominator that is oppressing, but like there's always consent to be oppressed. So like really the submissive in an S&M is the one with the power, because they have the safe word to like accept abuse or not. And as society, we always say like, oh, the evil elites and oh, the Satanists and oh, the pedophiles. But like, it's the same time, it's like, well, what are we doing to create this total opening for a dictator to be on the top? Like, why are we all acting like slaves and like passive and submissive? That's only our point of power, is to stop, playing that other side of the coin, because it doesn't even matter if we, like a lot of people are like, oh, we're just going to execute all the evil people. And it's like, yeah, but that opening's still there, and another one will just rise to the top. And like, we're creating that opening by just being willing slaves all the time, right? And that's why it's actually immoral to allow yourself to be a slave. Like, it's that self-defense principle. It's actually, I mean, like, yeah, you can be a pacifist and stuff, but I believe like at some point it's actually immoral to tolerate abuse. Like, even if you don't have the self-esteem not to, you're bringing down the quantum field, and you're normalizing abuse for everybody by choosing to be a slave yourself. So it's, again, like just that outer projection of it.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I think there's a lot of documentation, right, about these programs and people that are manipulating often through the government, right, and through the political system. So it's not hard to see if you are open to look, right? And I'm sure,
and again, it's that denial, right? And so like I've studied a lot of like abuse and narcissism and domestic violence and stuff, and you know, the codependent person always seems innocent compared to the overt abuser, right? But it's actually two sides of a coin.
Yes.
And I think at this time in history, like how many of us are just codependent with abusers and saying, oh, well, we didn't know grandpa was touching the kids. Like, but it's like, but that's because you're not looking, and that's because you're choosing not to know. And right now, I think in this society, like all the information is there. And like, despite the plans that these people have had to create their army, like in the quantum field, God, whatever you want to call it, has actually thwarted their plan to the point where a lot of people are actually getting their memories back. And in sort of a domino effect, the more survivors that come forward because they have a level of safety through the internet, the more survivors that come forward is activating more survivors to remember and to have courage to come forward. And so like there's kind of this wave actually of even, you know, like you think about people like Kathy O'Brien and stuff writing her book in the 90s, and you know, everybody just thought it was just completely ludicrous, right? And everything she said just turned out to be true. Like, and now it's being corroborated by multiple people over history and time. And so like, you know, it's kind of like that wave is just getting momentum right now. And that's why I say it's the most important to listen to these people, because they know how these abusers work. They've been subject to their power and control dynamics. They understand the psychology of what the game is. So even though these people have their evil plans, you know, the universe is not going to support their plans because it is against natural law. And so right now, all the information is there's so much information available right now for people that want to learn, but that's not the barrier. The barrier is that people don't want to know. And so I always say the most satanic thing I've ever heard is somebody saying, I don't want to know about child abuse because it's too hard for me to hear it.
Yeah.
Like that's a really satanic thing. And unfortunately, there's billions of people on the planet that feel exactly that way. And that's why we have the child trafficking and the child pornography and all this stuff going on. It's because people want to be codependent with the abusers and then feel virtuous that they didn't know, or that it wasn't them doing it. But it's the abuser cannot function unless they're in a system of enablers. And so right now I see like a society of enablers. And I think the challenge is to get people to like realize that hiding from this is not going to actually make it not affect you.
Yeah,
Totally.
well said.
Yeah, and like one of the polarizing aspects of this is that there's a group, you know, and it's like, yeah, it's kind of watered down and it's over generalistic, I understand, but like new agers, whatever, quote unquote, would agree with a lot of what we're talking about, yet they would not really tend to just look into like, oh, like avoid the negative, it's too like whatever, or
If you
like
focus on the negative, it'll increase. You know, there's a lot of that fear in that
yeah,
kind of new age
like
idea.
Yeah, Satanists love that. That's exactly what they want you to think, right?
instead of just like actually shining light, having awareness of these things, you know, making the darkness conscious and all that good old shadow work that we can find within ourselves, and you know, project that outward for other people to be motivated, inspired by, and informed through.
Yeah. What do you think, Jaymee, when people kind of are willing to open this can of worms and face the horror of it? You know, obviously we're all going to go through our own emotional process of horror, and which will include some desire for it not to be true, right? You know, but what do you recommend people do with the information? You know, because I think people could watch a movie, they could see, oh, this is happening, they could read an article, but then people feel, I think, very helpless about what to do.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel helpless sometimes too. Like I've spent so much of my time reading this, and I definitely have been traumatized. Like nobody should have to read as much about like child sexual abuse, and like it's I wouldn't recommend it to people because it could actually really debilitate like a lot of people, especially empathic people that care. Like it's not fun stuff to read, right? Like and so I don't recommend everybody do that because I actually don't think it's even necessary, like to even put into the quantum field. Like I think some of us need to understand it, and then we can maybe explain some stuff to other people. But I mean, if we're all going to have to like take this into our consciousness in the details of it, I don't think that's actually a good thing. I think it will traumatize people, like even to know. However, I think there is a level of knowledge where we really need to acknowledge this to exist. And I kind of like feel like that level might be different for different people. Like whatever it takes for it to hit you, like some people might just watch kind of a light level mainstream documentary that might be enough for them to, you know, and other people you know, might actually need to see something really graphic or hear a very personal account, like for it to really hit them. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I do believe that the universe provides like whatever we need. So I mean, like if you need a punch in the face, you'll get one eventually, right? But I mean, you can probably prevent that by being a little bit proactive, right? So I personally, and I mean, I'm not a super powerful person. Like I don't have millions of people to send out to do my will, and you know, tons of money to, you know, oh, just here, throw this $1 million. You know, I'm not that person, but I just think everybody has something like, and for me, like, it's not even that special what I can do, but I can read a lot of books and I can remember a lot of what I read. And a lot of people can't read. It's really uncomfortable for them. They hate it. Like, so I think like that's something very, very simple, but it is something that I have that I can do that other people can't do. So that's what I chose to do. Like, I'm like, that's something I can do that actually saves other people from having to do it. I can summarize things, I can explain things, and I can kind of give people little pieces depending on what I think they need, like to handle. I don't have to black pill everyone, right? Like, and so yeah, I think like everybody can do something, and I think everyone is required to do something at this point. I don't think it's other people's problem. I don't think it's like not your kids. I think this is an everybody problem right now. And if people think it doesn't involve them and they're going to sit on the sideline, like I don't think the universe is going to allow that for much longer. And I think the events over the last couple of years kind of was like the first, like, no, everyone's coming on the field. Like you don't get to not play. But I think that's going to intensify over time, where it's like you're not really going to get to be lukewarm or sit on the sidelines anymore. I think like what's being required of us right now is pretty serious because it involves children. And if you don't care about kids, like you're already dead. I think like if you don't care about kids, like I don't think you're even human anymore if you can't care about kids.
Yeah, and like going back at like, and there's not just one elephant in the room that is getting larger by the year or whatever, but there's multiple ones regarding a lot of multiple things that people need to address within themselves, what they're consenting to, complying with, or just like what it in general is going on with other people that's affecting them to a degree. And like you said, anyone consenting to their own slavery is having a ripple effect that's going to allow it for others in the future or whatever, since the ancient past and all that, you know, unfortunate, you know, inversion of the true quantum field creation, you know, life force energy that has been siphoned off, you know, perverted, inverted, and all these things, that which is, you
and
know, like
vampired.
exactly, yeah. So Satan is the adversary, right? So yeah, that's why they need to, you know, turn natural law over its head, which is why you have the pentagram, you know, inverted, because you have the stellar, you know, consciousness, you know, in the ground, you know, on that, you know, chessboard of duality.
Spirit is on
Going
the
back to
bottom.
the, you know,
Yeah. And like it is the collective shadow. Like this evil is our shadow. Like this, like it's like we're individuals, but we are also like one mind too. So it's like this evil is the shadow of humanity. Like, and it's like a bunch of people are thinking, oh, that's not my shadow, that's not my shadow. But it's like, no, it's everyone's shadow. Like whether it's the abusers or like the children being abused, like we have inner wounded children, we have an internal abuser. Like it's all, when you look at the inside of a fractured mind, it becomes like a mini society that's actually a internalization, like you say, as within, so without, but as without, so within. So when they fracture and program the mind, they actually make an internal society, which is a replica of the society around them, right? So that's when things are unconscious, that's when they're replicated. So all these control dynamics will keep being replayed until they are made conscious. And so as dark as all this is, like, I mean, because I knew about this stuff 10, 15 years ago when, like, if I even mentioned it, people just thought I was like nuts. And like, even talking to like social workers and counselors, like they were like just like didn't understand this because it wasn't something they learned in school. Like, even having a challenge with those people that, you know, you think would like that understand trauma or PTSD or like basic stuff, that like they would be open to knowing about this. And I've seen such a change over the last 2 years, like with stuff coming out and people acknowledging the child trafficking and like, you know, so for me, I'm like, okay, no, the shadow is coming out, and as dark as it is, like I feel like excited about it because I was sitting with it when it was just subliminal for so long. And like, you know, I think it is a great opportunity right now, like really.
That's, I appreciate that hopefulness. What do you think is happening, let's say, in the media and other kind of popular trends that is happening in the world that is part of this agenda that's hurting and dividing
I'm
people?
actually not paying that close attention to stuff going
Yeah.
on right now, because I actually just decided to take a break from it, because for a while there was really on the precipice of everything unfolding every day. And I was finding that I was kind of being pre-traumatized by stuff that wasn't even really happening yet, like being on Telegram and stuff. So
Sure,
I
but I guess
decided to kind of take a step.
Yeah, I was thinking about things that you have talked about quite a bit, though, around like pornography or
Want to bring up that example that we talked about earlier with what's happening in Japan, and how like even like tying into our last discussion we have with Sarah Cross, where there's like this, you know, it's part of this transhumanist trajectory where AI is included, and there's all this chat GPT talk about even, you know, like artificial sex dolls and puppets, not just the blow up ones, you know, like technology has improved. So beware,
your
folks. And like,
VR glasses are, you know,
and like
multifaceted.
pornography is another subject we're going to get into that just divides people even more. Jaymee, I know you have a lot to speak about that. But just like going like specifically to this, you know, thing going on in Japan and this and that, and how it's just, yeah. And how
Yeah, I wish
people
I
can
could
just
remember
look,
the name of
yeah.
the place, but yeah, it just came to my attention that there's basically just kind of a trend where people are really asexual and childlike. Like they would just be like really frigid and like blush if somebody even tried to hold their hand, or like it's really like, you know, like grade 4 crush kind of stuff. And like it's, you know, really part of the social engineering, which I think is like partially chemical, you know, like messing with hormones and stuff, and then partially just the social engineering where like people are really made to be like, you know, childlike and like really uncomfortable with like normal sexuality or even a male female companionship. Like it's really like the people just read Japanimation and stuff, which is like cartoons and pornography. And it's interesting because some of the girls like they prefer to read Japanimation of two young men together. So I don't really know what that is like on the sexual dictionary, but it's like just this weird thing where people just read Japanimation and aren't really interested in being around the opposite. They're like little grade 4 kids that maybe have a crush and would avoid like, oh, boys have germs kind of thing. And it's kind of like just the norm there now, you know? And I think that's really what they want to do everywhere. And I never thought I would be the person like complaining about pornography. Like I never thought that would be what I would be doing, because I used to actually teach sexual education and work in harm reduction, and I was a medic in the military, and like I just had this really medical background and social work background where it was like, as long as people are safe and like, you know, there's just everything's just kind of like your own autonomy. And you know, but for me, when I actually really started seeing some of the effects of the pornography on society, and this is just in the last couple of years for me, like I was like, hang on a second, I think I maybe overlooked this, like, because I think this is actually one of the biggest tools being used right now to really regress people down to their lowest base nature and become a surrogate for relationships. And then again, taking that to the next level where they have the sex bots and the AI and the incels, and people are just using pornography. Like, I mean, there's just, I've done a few shows on it for sure. Like, I mean, the science doesn't lie. Like, it's actually making people less sexual and asexual. Like, there's kind of a peak where they're kind of like sex obsessed and over consuming, and then it kind of hits a peak, and then it really declines down to like where it actually steals their sexuality. They are impotent and they have no ability to connect at all. So it really kind of amps people up and then deflates them. And I see that happening on a mass scale for men, and I'm and women too now, as men and women's masculine and feminine roles become more inverted, and you know, the pornography is playing into all of that too. So I think it's just a really big thing that people need to just really realize, like, why are you being offered free heroin? And I really think of pornography as heroin. And I think a lot of people think it's really normal and they think they're going to just do heroin on the weekends. And it's just not going to work that way.
Yeah. So there's an addiction element. How is that being exploited?
Yeah, it's not just the addiction to pornography, but it's priming people for all addiction, right? Because it's the same part of the brain. And like an orgasm's a pretty good positive reinforcement. Like it's got a physical aspect, it has neurotransmitters, like it's just a burst of dopamine and like, you know what I mean? So that's a real, like looking at just, you know, Pavlov's dogs research and stuff, like really like
I'm
that's a
glad you
really
mentioned that.
strong
Yeah,
reinforcement.
Pavlovian shit. Yeah.
Yeah, and it also depletes like in serotonin because it's so out of nature, right? Like I mean, if you lived 100 years ago, you might have seen one or two, you know, pair of breasts in your life, and that would have been pretty exciting, right? Like whereas now, like it's like that desensitization is just, you know,
Yeah.
and then people becoming so addicted, they actually deplete all their serotonin. And I actually worked in a residential treatment facility, and it came to my attention that all the men were literally staying in their room watching pornography all day. And I thought, okay, so we're supposed to be helping people with addiction and mental health when like it's depleting all their serotonin, leading to depression, leading to more addiction, like leading to low self-esteem. Like, but somehow this is okay, like to just fill this, you know, stopping one addiction and then just, you know, coping by watching pornography all day, like in a publicly funded facility, like somehow this was okay. You know, this is just, I could go off forever about, you know,
well,
what I really think about the system, but.
And then there's an impact on the family system, on the relationships between, you know, intimate partners, on, you know, a lot of,
expectations between certain relations. But anyways, you know, in certain situations, or in a lot of them, what the fuck happened to actually calling it making love and acting upon that as if you embody that with that heart-based intention with the other person through the intercourse, not just, oh, willy-nilly sex or just to get your fucking rocks off or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's out of context, right? It's just taking the sex acts to the physical out of a context and out of, it's a one chakra, right? Like it's not, it's so again, it's that really satanic like fragmentation even, which like is rewiring the brain for that way, right?
Yeah. Separating the sexual organs and the lower chakras from the heart, from the mind, you know, or the intuition, right? It's all being separated, and then the attachments between people are being weakened, and that affects, you know, all levels of our society. I'd love for you to share more about that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main things about pornography is like people are like, it just puts you more into like instant gratification. You're flipping through the people, and then people go online just flipping through, you know, potential dating partners as though they're just disposable objects or commodities to be consumed or disposed. Or so it's just rewiring all of that for consumer culture, disposable culture. People are just interchangeable, replaceable objects. Like, and then the because you're getting so much dopamine, it's the same as if you would have been with 10 women that are 10s, even though they had to get surgery to be a 10. Like it's really unnatural, right? Like most people are like a 5 to 7, and that's great. That's normal, right? Like, but like when you're watching, you know, these kind of unnatural bodies all the time, you're kind of used to that being, you know, and then you go online and these people, everybody's actually thinks they're so awesome now. People don't even want to date because nobody thinks anyone's even good enough for them to date, even though everybody's like a 5 to 7. Everybody kind of thinks they're a 10 and that they deserve a 10. And it's really funny, actually. You know? There's so much for nothing. Like,
It's
that's
weird
kind of what the porn does, is wire you for that.
Right. And it's also like a way of judging people by a very material, superficial measure, right? And again, separating from the heart, separating from even like your own true self, I think, you know, as a feeling person, and your own the deeper needs, right?
But hey, it's like people have created this for ourselves, and like all these dopamine junkies, you know, with their Tinders and grinders or whatever, that social dating finders. But for us to flip the script, kind of like how I mentioned of, you know, like, all right, enough with the sex, and everyone has their own free will to do whatever, but a lot of people are operating from their lower senses and not integrating that higher heart-based intelligence, which is that center chakra part of the whole body. Anyway, so to kind of shift gears, because I would love to hear, Jaymee, like as far as like what we've all touched upon, especially, you know, everything that you mentioned, and I so appreciate, all these areas that and aspects that you mentioned. It's really deep and profound, and I really, yeah. What can we do to kind of see things even apophatically, as far as like seeing like, okay, so wow, shit's fucked up. The more I look into it, like, oh my God, like it seems so daunting, or like feel disempowered. How can we, do some kind of alchemical shift to kind of like be like, okay, I don't want to see the world like this. I want to be something else and better than whatever the fuck preceded my existence and what I was birthed
Right.
into. Regardless of what I've suffered, how can I fucking heal? How can I help others heal? How can I show people a better way of life and all that jazz?
And how protect our children too.
Boom.
Right. Yeah, and I just want to say, like, I'm like, I know, like, I just never want to come across as some like radical feminist trying to shame people about like pornography. Like, I'm really not. Like, I'm really an advocate for like people to not become enslaved by it, because what it actually does is weaken your will and enslave you, and it's like a boa constrictor. Like, it's actually like the more you allow it into yourself, the more it is programming you from the inside. And like, I just like from like an occult perspective, like it's like I said, my friends that are conspiracy researchers or have studied the occult stuff, like they get it. They get how this is a weakening of the will and an enslavement. It's not liberation or sexual freedom, or like it's really just enslaving you, the same as drug addiction or heroin. So like just like I really come from a place of wanting to empower people, and I mean, it's just so obvious, like when when the last couple of years all this stuff had happened, like they were making all the porn free on Pornhub, like, right, because they just want men's life force to be depleted as they're trying to bring in the new world order. They want you to already be kind of tired because you already got up. Like, you're not going out to be a warrior after that, right? Like, you're probably just going to eat a sandwich and have a nap. And like, it was so deliberate, like how they did that all at the same time. Like, and I think a lot of men are starting to wake up to like how it's really being weaponized against them and just keeping them in a really weak state of their own will. And so, Derek, just to bring it back about like, how can we be empowered? I think just like number one is like knowledge and accepting the truth, and being willing to like actually like admit and look at the truth. And a lot of the powerlessness and the learned helplessness and the lack of options is actually an illusion. And a lot of the evil is actually a suggestion that you're coming into alignment with. And that's kind of one of their biggest tricks that we actually saw played out, like where people really felt like they had to do some things over the last couple of years, but like actually it was an act of their will to do those things because they preferred the consequences to not other consequences. And so that's a big trick they use a lot of times on people, is to make a lot of suggestions that people are coming into alignment with kind of unconsciously. Yes, the world is in a really dark place right now, but at the same time, I think it always has been. And I think this is actually one of the first times where the shadow is actually being exposed. And I think there's some people who kind of think they still get to be on the sideline and that humanity is just going to evolve without them playing their role. And we're all a grain of sand, and like it can feel really small to be a grain of sand in an hourglass, right? But like we are all, we all matter as one little grain of sand. Like, and so I just really recommend people, like, you have something that you can do and you might not think it's important. Like I said, like I just read books. Like that's not like some crazy, thing. I mean, everybody has something they can do. And so it's like just figuring out what that is, and actually like taking some pressure off. Like you're not going to personally go and like bust down an operation. And like, like when you start thinking that way, like I've done that too as an empath, like just feeling like this burden, like way bigger than what I could ever even, like it's physically impossible for me to like carry the burden of the world, but like feeling this weird responsibility and really working to kind of be like, you know what, yeah, there's a lot, but like I can do something in my life with the people that I'm interacting with. Even this podcast today, like maybe not everybody can do that, but everybody can do something. And believing you have nothing to offer is part of their mind control. right? That's really, they really want you to believe that. They really want you to believe that you have nothing to offer. Nobody values, you know, what you have to contribute, and it's better just to stay safe. And like, that's all an illusion.
Yeah. I liked what you said about the illusion, right? That when someone says this is a mandate, right, that's really more of a suggestion in reality with a fancy name that they know is going to trigger people's like automatic compliance to authority kick in, right? Which I would say the compliance to authority is part of mind control, where we've been unconsciously programmed to believe that there are authorities separate from us and we need to do what they say. So when certain words are used, we just step in line. And so part of the solution is really questioning that. One, recognizing that authority is a false construct, and that we have our own inner authority and our ability to critically think and ask questions, right? Ask questions and really know that there's a line here around like, no one has the right to like tell us we can't go visit our grandma, or that we can't stand in a line, you know, arm in arm, or you know, go into a store, you know, without a cloth on our face. So whatever it might be, there's all these ways that fear has been used to exploit people to do things that are irrational. So I think this solution has to do on many levels with, like you said, educating, getting knowledge, and then recognizing that we ultimately are responsible for our own choices. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also like a sense of humor too, and just like, and part of getting over the fear is realizing like how cowardly and pathetic and like weak these, like even these people, like they are the wizard behind the mask. Like a lot of these, you know, like old pedophiles and stuff that have all this money and people working for them, like if you saw them one-on-one, like they're the most pathetic. Like like we have to stop like giving them, like kind of projecting onto them like this power that they really don't have, because most of their power is by default and by our ignorance, and like by us acquiescing to what we believe is actually like a threat, when like it's really like. And I think there actually has been some humor, like even in the last couple of years, like it was just so ridiculous. Like, like on one level, like what's happening on the planet is so funny right now. Like even the evil villains we have are just such losers. Like it's almost comical at some point, where it's
I
like
know.
God does have a sense of humor. Like even just putting these people out, like in their like little spacesuits coming and threatening us. Like it's really kind of like laughter, and just actually like it kind of just deflates that intimidation. And I like what you said about you know, the compliance, because that's always something that's bothered me from being even a little kid, is that you're a good boy or a good girl if you comply with the will of the authority figure. Like that's what, like your parents right away, like, oh, you're so good, you went to bed when I told you. And like we're always conditioning people to think that they're actually good for complying. And so I've seen all these adult children in the last couple of years thinking they're good for complying. And it's like, I think that's one of the main mind controls we need to also overcome, is that like compliance is not a virtue, you know, like we need to like undo that program that's been really pushed like through all of our systems since we're a kid. And it's just total BS. Like that is not true at all.
And it's tied to kids going to school, right? Which is where there's all sorts of threats to parents if you don't send them there every day, and you know, if they don't go to every period, and if they talk back to the teacher, you get in trouble. You know, there's a whole aspect here of, I think that you know, that the school system is one of the places where a lot of this dark agenda is being activated, you know, put in place from early for all kids. You know, because what would you say to moms? I mean, here's, you know, these movies like the one that recently came out about child trafficking, I forget what it's called now, become pretty popular out there. And there's like knowledge, you know, in the community I live in, there's like, I notice people are afraid to let their kids go play outside a lot because there's, you know, worries there's pedophiles in the community or things like that. And, you know, you made a point that it's not just, you know, these local people that we need to worry about. So then what would you advise to parents about how to protect their children? How do we start a new generation that's not vulnerable to this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have children, so I always try to be super respectful when I give people advice that have kids, because I realize I don't, and I, like I do respect that people are dealing with a lot of stuff that I'll probably never really understand. But, just kind of from the outside, it's really horrifying to me, like what's going on in the school system, because from my research, like this is just such an extension of the MK Ultra program and the sexualization, because there is no better way to fracture a child than sexual abuse. Like, and I will die on that hill. Like, there's no better way to mess up a human being than to abuse them sexually at a specific time in their development when it's inappropriate. Like, that is like the number one tool of abusers, and the strategic application of trauma is the sexual abuse is so key. Like, I don't believe any of this other stuff would work without the sexual element. Like, it's just really, really like inverting the way that humans are meant to evolve into sexuality with autonomy and like in a progression of evolution. Like, and so forcing that is like one of the worst things you can do to a human. And so seeing what's going on in the school system today still blows my mind that this has gotten this crazy in my lifetime. Like that. And the craziest part about it to me is how many people are like not feeling a fire lit under their ass, like where they're just like somehow they're allowing this to be normalized. And like even teachers going in showing pornographic pamphlets to children, and again there's that fracturing of the like teacher going in thinking like, oh, this is my job, and this is there's experts that have said this is normal, and therefore, even though like any person that's honest with themselves, like would, if they're really honest with themselves, like, and you're handing that pamphlet to a child, like, that's wrong. Like, if you don't know that's wrong, like there's something really wrong with you. And what's really wrong with you is that you're completely fractured as a human being, and that part of you that needs to comply, to be accepted, to be seen as good, is overriding what you know is right and true, even to harming a child. So that's like really, I just can't believe how many people are going along with this at this point. Like even teachers working, like I'm being pretty hard on teachers right now, because that just doing my job thing, I just like, I've seen nurses doing it, and then now I'm seeing teachers doing it, and I'm like, that is not going to fly with me. Like I said, when it comes to kids, I'm a hard ass. Like I don't like, no excuses. I don't want to hear it. Like, if you're going to work right now and you're showing pornographic lists to kids, that's not okay.
Yeah. Saying no, is an important self-defense. So children need to learn about self-defense, and that it's okay to say no to any adult who is coercing them, pressuring them from any place of authority to if it involves violating their body autonomy, or their, even just things like withholding them from being able to go to the bathroom or to eat.
Yeah.
Asking
permission for everything, right? Even the words.
Where are these youngsters going to learn that from? Like, so all these youngsters that we're talking about, Leslie, like, where are they they're gonna be learning it from these authorities that are kind of like circumventing their free will choice, to their own manipulative, intentions in a sense. So
the parents ultimately need to take back the power. Yeah, and the parents are also in these positions of being intimidated. Like I could say myself, like you get calls, you get emails, you get texts, you get threatening letters. If your child misses a class, there hasn't been excused, you have to call in and excuse everything. Like they have us on this like little fear string. So parents are falling for this. Parents are accepting the authority of what, of who, and we're not activating the sacred word no. We're not recognizing our true power. We're not recognizing that even in the false like educational codes, the parents are supposed to be the head. Like nothing's supposed to happen to their child without their consent. That's being violated in almost every school meeting. Parents aren't being encouraged to challenge, the schools. They're being intimidated to follow and do what they want. I've been there. I've seen it many times.
Yeah, real quick, I remember what I wanted to say, and it was a question to you, Jaymee, as far as like, and I appreciate you like trying to hold people accountable in whatever field of work that they're in. And my question would be like, is any as far as any kind of solution or, recommendation towards these people, because, basically what you said is, they're saying certain things and operating off of, their kind of basis of what they believe is to be true. And for that to be, set for the context, going back to what you said, we were talking about earlier, their context is, what they believe to be as honest,
Mm.
which is not necessarily, objective truth, right? So when they're handing out these pamphlets or whatever, they actually think they have the right intentions in mind. They don't think they're in the wrong. They have a justification of things, which is in context of a false pretext and a justification. Use and fictare is to make a right, which is kind of a man-made law. It's not based off a natural law, if you will.
Fictional.
So to kind of, make things more aligned towards natural law and objective truth and morality, how can we get, the top authority to the root down towards these seeds, these youngsters, these, you know, youthful individuals of consciousness, budding with, so much imagination that is beaten down, throughout the years of their growing up and through the institutionalized, common core curriculum that's been corrupted for however many centuries, whatever. But yeah, going back to solutions, Jaymee, on anything that
Yeah,
remember.
sure. And I'm glad you mentioned the imagination, because I just wanted to throw in that that's really what porn steals from people as well, because everything's imagined for you. And that's why people can't generate fantasy out of their mind. And that same part of your mind that generates sexual fantasy also generates creative ideas and and so that's one of the things that pornography is really stealing from people, is the ability to imagine. And so like that's something you really want to guard, because again, we need to be able to think for ourselves. And again, we're all fractured because of the society we live in. So we're taught through the school system not to trust our own intuition. Like you said, like you have to go to the bathroom, but you have to ask permission for somebody else, when they should be encouraging children to be in touch with their own bodies, which is, if you feel hungry, you should eat. It's your job to check in and see if you need a drink of water. If you need to go to the washroom, you need to take care of yourself. Like that's how you would teach a child to be in tune with their body. And I spent a lot of time in the military, and I always say I had to undo what I did to myself by going in the military, because all the training is disconnecting you from yourself, right? Like whether it's
Yes.
doing drill or just eating when you're not hungry, going for a run when you're tired, waking up when you're supposed to be sleeping. Like if they just like all the time. So that's how they get you to follow orders, because you get so disconnected from yourself and fragmented that the only way you could cope is to anchor to somebody giving you orders. And they've done that to us on like a mass scale. And when I got out of the military, like I really had to, like I'd notice myself reading books, and I would be like, oh, I'm so thirsty, and I've been thirsty for an hour, but why didn't I go get a drink? Like I was overriding my body needs just because I was like, oh, I got to finish this chapter. And so like that's not healthy, right? But we see like that's rewarded in our society as a virtue, to like push yourself and override and have the will like as the forefront of what you're trying to do, right? So yeah, I think with looking for solutions, I mean, it's really, I think, like connecting with like your body first of all. Like I'm a very big advocate of reconnecting with our bodies, which because yeah, we do have an internal guidance system. We are naturally empathic. I mean, I guess there's exceptions, but like I mean, we are just so disconnected from our internal like body systems. And so like any way you can reconnect with that, because a lot of times you just feel something's not right. Like, I mean, what happened over the last couple of years, like a lot of people felt this is not okay, but like overrode that because they saw compliance as a virtue. And so like, that is a really dangerous place to be. And I always compare all of this. And I think it's really important for people to understand the trauma-based mind control. But I also think at this time in history, if you don't arm yourself with knowledge of narcissism, psychopathy, and like that whole dynamic in psychology, you're going to have no idea what's going on with you, because right now we are in an abusive relationship, and we are in a cult that we're actually trying to get out of as humanity. We've been unconsciously indoctrinated into the cult of humanity, and right now it's like we're kind of growing up and realizing that we've been in a cult, and not really knowing how to get out, because we haven't experienced a different reality. We've just been grown up in this for generations and had it replicated on us. And if you really look at the dynamics of abusers and abusive situations, like they're always trying to make you think that you need them, and that no one else would love you, and that you're not going to be okay on your own, that you can't trust your own judgment, and like all of these things. I mean, a lot of people have been through it personally, which has probably armed us better to see what's coming at us right now. But like if people can't see that's what's being played out with these these kind of evil villains, like personifying that archetype to an extreme, right? Like and literally like abusing children in front of us, like we're getting as much as we need. Like it's going to get even worse than that if we don't actually step up and confront this head on. So they'll push it as far as it can go. So like we just need to step up at this time. We're not going to avoid this through being a coward at all.
Right. So important what you just said. And it comes back to that whole concept of codependency and how we're all codependents in this system. And so there's the micro level and the macro level where we can see the parallels. So I think I work with a lot of individuals who are sexually molested, let's say by a father or an uncle or grandfather, often even a mother too. But the common dynamic is that they were molested by another family member, whether it's a sibling or whoever, but the mother was the passive bystander who didn't do anything, that didn't protect them. And that wound is a deep wound, and often one of the hardest ones to heal. And
absolutely.
And I think that we're all symbolically in that position of being the mother, the bystander, we are starting to, there's no excuse really for us not to know what's going on in the world. And the kids that are being hurt, whether they're our kids or not, it's not just me and mine, but there's like this, we're bystanders to major abuses. And I think if we don't do something, we're being that parent that's just allowing their kid to be like tortured and molested in the room when you're sleeping,
because that person, the reason they do that is because they need to be liked, because they've made it like a god of their partner's approval or societal approval, or like people in society that want to be seen as good, order following or doing their job. It's like that deep-seated need to be approved or liked is overriding their drive to even protect the weak. And that's a really dangerous place to be, that a lot of people are in right now.
Right. And a financial dependence, right? Or a perceived emotional dependence. Like you said, I can't survive without this person, or I'm afraid what they'll do. Oftentimes there's abuse and threat, to the other parent, the passive parent as well.
Right.
You've got their tied around the finger, and so then they become a collaborator, a complicit with the crime that's going on under the roof. And so we have all these addictions, to having the comforts of our life, and the financial dependencies on the system, and the fear that if we stand up too much, that we're going to lose something that we think we need. And so I think it's a deep internal dive everybody has to do about their own like addictions, their own comforts, what their blind spot, what they're willing to overlook or not attend to because they don't want to give up something that's comfortable for themselves. We have to be real about that.
Yeah, and I think it's believing that there is like God is good, and there is good embedded in the nature of the universe, and that actually will, like, aligning with that is always gonna, like, even if there's an initial kickback, because it's like that's when abusers are the most dangerous, is when they actually know they've actually lost power for real, like you really are leaving, like it's a final, like there's no chance of them still manipulating. that's when, you know, like a lot of spousal murders and stuff happen, right? Because it's that final loss of control. So the danger is very real to breaking, you know, breaking relationships with abusers, because when they can't handle not having power and control, so like they'll turn into a vicious, low natured, you know, that's where the psychopathy is really going to come out. And so that's a very realist, like seeing what's happening right now, how we've had these controllers through history, and like we are right now, you know, at least becoming aware that we're being abused, and that, you know, it's like, you know, and maybe people don't know exactly how to get out of the relationship, or like, you know, and I worked in women's shelters and with domestic violence a lot and stuff, and there's just that mental slavery where people just believe they can't leave, right? Like it's really mental, and a lot of people judge those women. They say, why did they go back? And like it's just from the outside, it's just like a no-brainer to just, why would you tolerate this? But you know, understanding like the deeper psychology of like that learned helplessness and just that false mental prison, like I said, it's all a construct, it's all an illusion, and we're kind of all under that right now. So like it's just knowing that like if you take that first step out in faith, yes, there is going to be that danger, that person may try to attack at that point, but if you can just break that and get over, like you're always going to be better than you were if you stayed, no matter what, even if you have some hard times, right? Like it's hard for women and men to get out of, you know, these situations, but like it's that fear of the unknown that keeps them locked in it. And it's like there has to be a leap of faith to just knowing that like this is not like what my life's meant to be. And I think we all deep down know, like this is not, we are not here to be slaves. We're not here to you know, live in a world of perversion and you know, pedophilia, and it's like we all know this is not, you know, good for anybody, you know, like we know that, and we need to just even be willing to die to get to the chance of it not being here, because this is already, for me, at the line it's at now with the kids, like it's on. You know what I mean? Like this is not hypothetical anymore. Like it is on. We are there. It is happening. Like you're everything you do, there's no on the fence anymore. The game is like the whistle's been blown.
Serious. Yeah. It's like facing the fear of death, the fear of poverty, the fear of lack, the fear of being without love, without, you know, someone to take care of you. It's facing all those fears so that we can become fearless in the face of what's right. You know, and then taking that faith of trusting that when you do what's right, that the universe does respond in a way of creating goodness and protection. And I think that's very true. And I think this is going to be involving very specific decisions, like taking kids out of public schools, finding ways to homeschool, leaving certain jobs. If you are, you know, being asked to be you know, force people to do things against their will, you know, and with threat of violence, you know, that's not a good job to have. So it'd be, you know, good to leave it, right? Those are some of the steps that really help ultimately with these big decisions. The more that you know thyself and you know principles and you're operating through principles, the less vulnerable you are to all of these other areas of manipulation that are being used against us. And ultimately teaching our children how to self-protect and have self-defense, and all of us not be afraid of self-defense at all levels.
Right. And like, and having some patience too, because I think we're so wired for instant gratification, and that like, yeah, stuff doesn't just like work out for you perfectly the second you decide to do the right thing. There's actually usually some reciprocal, you know, centrifugal force coming at you from the evil that was building from you doing the wrong thing. And then when you redirect it, like you pretty much get like a huge tidal wave, and you're like, oh, I thought I was going to do the right thing, and now I'm out of a job, and I, you know, like everything's kind of gets worse before it gets better. And I think that's when a lot of people cave, because they're like, oh, I thought if I did the right thing, I would instantly like win the lottery the next day and get a free car. Like, it's like, no, it just doesn't work that way. Like you have to be able to go the distance, and then it does. It has to, like by law, like it just has to. But it's like people just, I think they're just too wired for it to be too instant and they give up.
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified, because there's like ripples of consequences to lifetimes, our lifetime of decisions, and that starts to become more apparent as you step kind of into consciousness. You can start to see the things you have to clear out and clear out and clear out.
Yeah, and like clearing out kind of like this false overlay of, you know, this whole and it falls in line with, you know, all the instant gratification and the lower sense pleasures, and you know how people are impulsive and motivated through, and how they go about their lives and this and that, the dopamine rushes, and you know, searching for that. And this is way dated before any kind of social media crap. We're talking about just, you know, things that are, you know, driving people away from that heart-based way of living. Not just, you know, oh, looking for relationships, but it's like you have to have that love for self first and foremost before you can love someone else and make love to someone else also. And that's kind of, you know, the false overlay of all this pornography and all this stuff of just like willy-nilly kind of stuff. Or and it could be, you can learn certain things, whatever. It's not like 100% bad. Like there's been like things in the past, there's been artistic expressions of that. But yeah, obviously all this, you know, especially since like the porn hubs and whatever the hells and this and that, and I've been a victim of that and broke that years ago. I've been, you know, free of that for years, but it just, you know, takes one away from that pure love expression, and actually like, hey, what the fuck are you actually looking for? And like,
Yeah.
there's these voids that people are filling in that are not satious at all for the soul. It's more
Mhm.
about, you know, like having love involved in the equation. Otherwise,
Yeah.
yes,
Right.
These things become proxies, right? You know,
yeah,
and like the
Yeah.
question, what are people really needing? And the word attachment and relationship comes up. And I think, you know, what is attachment, and how is that attachment, and how important is that to human life, you know?
I think it's like one of the most important things. Like, and I agree. It's all a counterfeit, and it's a counterfeit for intimacy, and intimacy requires vulnerability. And if people have the pseudo intimacy behind a screen, unlimited, where they're never even on a platter for rejection, right? Which a lot of men have had to deal with. That is a wound that is like like I said, most guys are like hopeless romantics until the first girl breaks their heart in high school, and then they're never gonna let that happen again, right? Like if you look at any player guy, it's like, oh no, I can track it back to that at some point, right? But that sweet guy was there. They are wired that way, right? And it is a counterfeit, like, and another counterfeit that I think is really important to people understanding like the psychopathy and narcissism is because narcissism is being promoted as the counterfeit for self-love. And so it's always promoting like, you deserve the best, and buy yourself a new sweater, and have all the girls you want, and have the dinner, and you know, glorify yourself on Instagram. And that is the counterfeit for real self-love. And real self-love actually is sometimes includes deprivation or discipline or being honest with yourself, or like, you know, like it's not all just loving yourself and worshiping yourself, but that's so promoted, right? Like, and it's such a counterfeit to just indulge yourself, you know. And it's like, that's not love.
Right.
Love
And
requires discipline, even on yourself.
and it's looking
but those
for,
people, they're looking for validation outside of themselves because
yes,
they need that. That's how
right.
That's
narcissists
narcissism.
operate. They need to have that, feed off of other people's energy.
Well,
That
and
vampiristic bullshit. Yeah,
it is
sorry.
also the, you know, it relates to this concept of attachment, which I wanted to clarify, because when our inner well is empty, you know, and we haven't learned like how to love ourselves truly, right, and to love others, then there's an empty hole psychologically, spiritually, that people seek to fill. And often they're seeking outside of themselves in these like addictive type relationships, or substances, or money making, or titles, or power positions, or ambitions, or careers, whatever it is, right? That keeps people, you know, maybe it's a job where they have power over people, or they get to tell people to lay down on the ground and, you know, or put their hands up, or whatever, you know. And so it goes back to like the healthy relationship start when a baby is born into a loving and caring and nurturing, you know, environment where there's a caregiver who's attuning, who has enough self awareness and self-regulation to be able to bypass their own need, their own desire for this moment of sleep, you know, to wake up and nurse their baby and not be mad at them for being a baby, you know, and being able to, you know, have the patience to respond and put another being before you, in a sense. Like it's a really mature thing that's required to raise a baby into a healthy adult. And I think that that is being attacked. I think that,
Yes,
you know, sending kids to daycare really young, you know, having kids cry themselves to sleep, you know, not understand, because there's a fear of making kids like dependent. Like there's an inversion going on that if you got to make a baby tough right from the start, or they're going to be dependent on you, and you know, and then instead you're creating narcissists and people with empty holes that are seeking all this
that are dependent.
Yeah.
So I think it's a total lie, and I could do a whole show on that stuff. And especially I always recommend Alice Miller's book, The Drama of the Gifted Child. Like, and I know in SRA and trauma-based mind control, that's like the mother-child bonding is like one of the main things they manipulate. And one of the things is that if the mother's not attuning to the baby starts attuning to the mother, and so that's wiring the child already to seek external, like it's out of tune with itself and outwardly focused. And like they do that deliberately with the trauma-based mind control to every single person in their program, but like they have done that on a mass scale as well.
Yes,
and
yes.
Like with secure attachment and stuff, it's like, no, if they get it, then they can leave and give it. And like when they don't get it, they're always looking for it. And like I would say so much parenting is inverted. Like, you know, all these manuals, like breaking the child's will and letting it, like, it's so evil, all of it. And again, because these doctors are seen as authority figures, like how many mothers overrode their own sacred, intuitive, like mothering, you know, thing. And like I said, I don't have kids. I have a puppy and nieces and nephews and stuff. And like, but I have a maternal drive, like, and I've channeled it into, you know, advocacy for what I research and stuff, but like, it's all coming from a maternal drive. And I keep saying, like, right now, we need everybody to be a mama bear and a papa bear and be a bear, because like there is people coming for the cubs right now, and it's not time to be passive. Like, it's like we need that actual archetype of like the vicious protector of mama bear and papa bear right now on a global scale.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Can I say something real quick? Because you made me think of something really interesting, because you know the term trauma bonding, right? I have never thought about it or heard about it, and I'm not like super versed or researched into this, but as far as like applying it to outside of like just a love relationship, but a mother-child relationship, this trauma bond that it's kind of created where the mother does something, you know, that traumatizes the child, and she later on recognizes that it traumatized the child, and she feels traumatized about it because, you know, intuitively or, you know, subconsciously, that she kind of recognizes that, and the conscious unconscious, you know, isn't fully aligned to that recognition, and there's that inner conflict. And then there's like this energetic, you know, tug of whatever between the mother and child, where there's like, you know, any kind of indifference, and then like growing up from that. And not, does that make
Or
any kind of sense, or is
overindulgence,
that
or almost like a mother guilt,
right?
and
That
then
guilt,
overcompensating
whatever.
in another dysfunctional way, right? There's all sorts of patterns. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
also
and
you're the
trauma,
only parents in the room, so
Yeah.
I think trauma
yeah, like
bonding and like intermittent reinforcement is another thing for people to arm themselves with, because trauma bonding is like a drug addiction, and it works on the same part of the brain. And I mean, like I've dealt with it as a young woman, like just not having the knowledge of what was happening, but like it's like it really does work on your brain just like a drug and just like gambling. And so like I think, you know, and seeing with even like what the governments have done over the last couple of years, like taking something away and giving something back, and it's kind of not, it's like intermittent and outside of our agency, like doing the right thing didn't get the right outcome. It just kind of is like there's restrictions, and then they're off, and then they're on. And so like they were actually really doing that to people, and creating like trauma bonding and intermittent reinforcement. And like, so that when people were given some freedom, they were like, oh, like, you know,
Yeah.
like thinking it's good and that they're
Yeah.
there for our best interest and projecting
Yeah.
all these good qualities onto them. And it's like, it's these dynamics are just played out so
Yeah.
textbook.
Get
That's
a
actually
check.
what I love about abuse, is it's actually pretty textbook. Once you read the
Right.
book, they're not that original.
You can
Psychopaths are
see
like,
it.
you know, they just run the same stuff in different ways. And once you understand the formula, it's really empowering.
Right. You can see it on all levels of our world. So the trauma bonding, just to define it a little, I guess, as I would see it, is the individual becomes both your abuser and your savior. Then that this trauma that is, you know, you're experiencing is then becomes, you learn to maybe fawn or become dependent on that person for your safety as well. Like, how would you define it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good definition too. It's really the person that's in that scenario has the illusion that the other person's behavior is a result of the other person's agency. So it makes you fret and work harder because you think, if I do this, then this person will do this. So you're fretting for control by trying to figure out a strategy for the outcome of someone else's behavior based on your behavior. But the trick is that person's behavior is not dependent on your behavior. It's actually like, it may work sometimes and it may not work other times. So like that keeps you on a gerbil wheel of trying to figure it out, which is compulsion and crazy making. But like, you know, it's really easy to fall into that because it's our nature. And it's like, it doesn't matter how smart you are, anybody can fall into that trap, like, especially if you don't understand that trap. And so I think that's a really good definition of, as well, of that. And they use this stuff in the trauma-based mind control. Like, that's why they have the parents abuse their own children, because the psyche can't handle that contradiction. The more contradiction, the better. This is the black and the white squares. Like, it has to have the duality in order to remain fragmented and segmented off. So like, they can't just have pure evil. They have to have the good and the evil together, contrasted and contradicting each other in order for it to work. That's the only way things split, because both things can't be true at the same time. So they have to repress one and the other would be true. And so that's just kind of this binary game they're playing through the trauma-based mind control.
Is this some kind of Rubik's Cube of unconsciousness, or what the hell?
Pretty much. Yeah. So becoming conscious, becoming knowledgeable.
Well said, Jaymee. Thank you, by the way.
Yeah. And becoming very self-aware of these like knee-jerk reactions and relationship patterns, you know, is really important at all levels. I think that as we heal ourselves and we in our immediate relationships, that is part of the bigger solution, you know, to the larger issues at hand.
And finding that common ground, like, because like I mean, there's just so much conflict in society right now. It's so polarized, and you know, anyways, but like, I always try to think, and this is like, I just use this in counseling too, is like both people normally actually are coming from the same virtue, but they both have a distorted expression. But if you really like can get down to the core, like, even though people may be doing the exact opposite and doing something that you seem as evil, like in their like construct, they see that exact same way as you, but like, it's actually normally the same virtue that's on the same side of the coin. So like, we went to a rally where it was a rally for like leaving kids alone. It wasn't against trans, it was just against like, it was just like about leaving children innocent. And so, but the trans interpreted that as an attack that they needed to retaliate. And they were actually quite violent at this particular rally I went to. And like, in thinking about it in hindsight, I was like, but they really believe that they were protecting children from being attacked from somebody trying to stop them from their autonomy. Like, and so like understanding how these virtues get distorted through mental constructs, but the heart is like, you know what I mean? And so like breaking down a lot of the mental stuff, because people are coming from their heart, even though it's distorted.
That's the true dissolving of the divide that we need, is, you know, for people to realize that, you know, that the intention of goodness for free expression, for identifying your own self the way you want, we all want that, but we're being manipulated to fight against each other rather than to recognize we're really on the same side, and that the place to put opposition are these manipulators at a whole nother level of society in the world, that where we all need to say no to. Yeah. It's tricky. It's like a big tricky game, and if you go to sleep for a minute, you're missing something. And it's interesting, but it's, again, like you were saying earlier, it's not about watching the news and knowing like these specific storylines. It's about knowing the playbook, I guess, and the principles. So if you like understand how trauma affects the mind and the body and relationships, and you understand about the basic like secure attachment model, and and you understand about what healthy sexual development is developmentally for children, you have these sort of knowledge bases then, and you understand rights and what's wrong, and you understand that we all have value that's worth defending, right? Then we're going to know instinctively, I think, when wrong is happening.
Right. Yeah. And I think most of the agenda has just been to disconnect people from like not only their bodies, but I mean, like, we are born with intuition and empathy, and these things are like, they are our guidance systems. And I just think, like, whether it's like the pornography or like really violent movies, or just, like all these things we're consuming all the time are just like we're literally shutting off our empathy to watch them. And it's like, just being really aware of that, like, or even, going into certain jobs and stuff. I'm a very empathic person, and like I've worked in some really hardcore places, like during the opioid crisis and stuff, like where I need to just shut it off to go in and do my job, or I'm like, I won't be able to do it. Like I need to go into like Army Jaymee, and I'm like, no, like I'm going in to do this, and I'm not going to feel anything when I'm doing it. I'll think about it later when I get home. Like I'm not, I can't go in there as an empath. Like it's like a war zone, right? So yeah, it's like a time to be able to shut it off. It's like that should be in your will, not because somebody else is making it where you actually can't turn it on or off anymore, right? Like it's that's really like, that's what I think worries me so much about like the pornography and stuff. Like I really see that happening, like, and especially because again, it's out of context, where you're not thinking about how did this person get into this, like, and the thing about trauma-based mind control is most of those people are used in pornography without their own conscious knowledge. And so if you're understanding that, like what you're seeing on the screen, like I said, was like a false front in a Western building, like what you see is this image, but like what goes behind making that image is pretty horrible if you're really honest with yourself, right? But people just want to segment, compartmentalize, and put on the horse blinders and take it out of context so that they can enjoy it. But like it's like that actually is conditioning you to segment off yourself. Like especially how some people will be like, oh well, I love my wife, but this is my other self that is separate, right? And so like you're always making a separate self and then a separate self, and so you're kind of doing trauma-based mind control on yourself by making it so like you have to have segments. And our society is already set up that way. We have to be a different person at work than we are with our friends, and it's just it's like we're all being encouraged to just segment off ourselves all the time, and that's really deliberate.
Secret lives, and not taking the time to integrate your experiences. It's we have such fast-paced lives. We need to be able to integrate all of our experiences and be able to reflect and to recognize what we experienced, to use our critical thinking, right, and emotionally process things. Most of us are not doing that.
And when do people have the time or actually make the time for those things? Right? Because
we're not taught.
People are I mean, things are even tightening worse than ever before. People have to work, 1-2 jobs almost just to make ends meet.
Survival fears,
any
survival
kind of vacation,
stress,
whatever, But and the social engineers say like, oh, you got to go elsewhere to, have vacation and forget about everything. But people are actually just taking the time on a daily basis to exit out of the matrix to really take time to make sense of, their own personal gnosis,
Mhm.
so they
Yeah.
can, just incorporate and integrate everything that is supposed to be operating on their, true trajectory of, their true purpose in life, not just,
Yeah.
what,
What we're being
everything's been
told.
compartmentalized. What you said, Jamie, I like what you said with that, and a lot of other great points you mentioned. But I don't know, we've been going on for like 2 hours or something like that. So
Yeah,
as
it's
far as
time
like
to
winding it down
one.
and like, I'd love to hear any in nutshell forms, I guess, just to keep it short and sweet in a sense, or not, I don't care. But just to really focus in on solutions, and to for people to take away
Mhm.
some true golden nuggets of, like we
Yeah,
talked about pretty
a
dark
lot of
stuff.
stuff.
So
Yeah, the most important thing you think people need to leave with, and what to do.
I think just like I mean, like I said, it's right now we have the good and evil is so amplified, and like I think of those lottery balls where they all get blown up and they're all like blowing around and then they're gonna land somewhere. That's kind of where we're at right
that's
now, right? Like everything's like going
mm,
crazy and we're all just like, right. And like, so now is the time to do something. And I know we're made to feel like we're like powerless. And like I've collapsed into that before too, where I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Like it's just, but just like I just really like encourage people to not collapse into that, because that's just really something they want you to believe. And it is a suggestion. And like you can do something, everybody can do something, and now is the time, because everything is up in the air and there is that opportunity, and it's all the little grains of sand combined. Like you don't know if there's like just 2 or 3 people on the planet even doing a certain thing. Like it can amplify like on a quantum level. Like it's like, don't feel like anything you do, it like let go of that impatience for wanting immediate reward, right? Like working in social work, like you don't know like what somebody does after they leave your office, or like you like to think you made an impact, and sometimes people come back and tell you that they did, that you did, and that feels really good. But if you, it's not like sales where you're like, oh, I did a good job and I made the sale and got the reward. You do what you do and you hope it has an effect. You never really know, right? And so I think that's a skill you can develop, where you're doing it just because you're doing it, not because of the reinforcement or the reward or knowing that it's working. Like just do it anyways. You have no idea the impact that it can go out, and like stop looking for it. Just do it. Just align with the principle, do the right thing, do the best, do something, and just let it go. Just do it. Just do it for the sake of doing it. And it does matter right now. Like now is the time. There's a momentum, there's a wave, there's an opening. We are growing up, we are waking up. There's ugliness going on, but it's like now is the time to actually put some effort forth. So that's just what I kind of want to say in closing.
Yeah, great. I agree with that 100%. Yeah. Thank you, Jaymee. Yeah, you have so much knowledge on so many areas. Like we could talk to you for hours, and I really appreciate the overview and the way that I think you're able to tie together these topics at the more of the principal level, right? The basic level of things. So thank you so much. I look forward to doing more stuff with you and in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, anytime.
yeah,
Like I said, we could probably like pick a topic and do so many shows. Like there's so many different ones. I feel like this one was pretty general, but any
Yeah.
of this stuff we talked about could probably be a show on itself.
Oh,
Sure.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And
unfortunately, yeah. It's such a pleasure and kind of like almost bittersweet, because you can touch upon so many things, and we can dive in so deep on certain things, and just kind of spread the butter a little thin then on the bread than the time we have for whatever. But I was really juiced up after midnight at the time I'm at, with the last thing you said, because I don't just like riding off of the energy that you have, that drive of life. It's like this self-perpetuating life force energy, that will force, where you actually found your purpose, even if it is having to deprogram yourself through whatever that you've had to endure in this life. It is so much worth not doing anything about it. So yeah, I really greatly appreciate, everything you've, mentioned in this, show with us today, Jaymee, and I really hope that people can, you know, find an inspiration through any, shade of light regarding any, you know, darkness being, touched upon, and shown upon. So
Yeah, and if you have some websites or articles or books or anything that you think would be good to link into the comments, you don't have to give them to us now. I know everybody asked you for that, but
No,
like,
I just
on the
I'm
spot,
so
now's the
like I need
time.
to
Like,
set up my
yes.
own webpage and stuff. Everybody keeps bugging me, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, so I can't. I just need to hire somebody to do it.
right, yeah, but I know you have resources, and so I think you have a lot of articles, or not articles, but interviews out there. So people could follow you, find your interviews, and follow these topics, because you go in more intensive depth on some of these topics in various interviews, and then eventually we'll get you your own website. Yeah, share
Yeah,
more.
I
Yeah,
recommend
and I just want to say in
tackling.
closing, like, just really
Please.
remember that evil people are losers. Like, they really are.
Mhm.
Stop putting them on a pedestal. Like, these people, like, it's they are losers. They are weak. They are cowards. They are chicken. Like, we actually just need to be brave and call them out. Like those bullies on the school field, when you stand up to them, they just cower. And that's like, really right now, I think that is what's going on in humanity. And like, we need to stop actually making these people seem way scarier than they are, because they really aren't. They're people who abuse kids, and that's not very tough. It's pretty easy to abuse a kid. There's really nothing easier in the world than to abuse a kid. So just keeping that in mind, like, just knowing that, like we have everything these people don't, and we just need to claim it and own it and use it and go with it and do something, and it's over.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Great. All right.
Hell yeah. And when you roll with that, you actually find you can laugh at these people to a degree, although nothing's funny about, anyone being taken advantage of, whatever age they are. And yeah, like as far as like that, having that life force energy, that is the opposite of what these people are running off of, because they need our life force energy. That's what they're looshing out of us through so many different manipulative tactics. So maneuvering
Stop
through
giving
this
them your
matrix
blood.
is,
Stop giving your
yeah.
blood to vampires.
Yeah,
Take your
for
arm
sure.
off.
Boom.
Yeah, excellent.
And yeah, I
All
was
right.
wearing orange for the second time. We're gonna release this around Halloween, and I know you have some pretty deep knowledge as far as, all these, perverted, inverted holidays. So yeah, just beware of,
Interesting.
what these energies are trying to leash out of us or
What a
whatever. So,
cutie.
yeah.
Oh my
Puppy break.
Oh,
gosh.
hey there.
I
Yeah.
highly recommend getting a really cute little puppy, because it helps a lot too.
Oh, yes, I know. All
Yeah.
right. Thank you, Jaymee, so much. We'll look forward to future meetings, and thank you everyone for watching Dissolving the Divide. All right.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jaymee.
Anytime, if you ever want to do, I really like your trauma little presentations. I'll definitely pass those. Like, I think those are great resources. Like, you just really clearly explain stuff that people just got to learn, so I love that. And yeah, if you ever want to do some shows on more like trauma stuff or whatever,
cool. Awesome.
anytime, you guys. I'll never say no if you ask me to come back for whatever.
I appreciate. Yeah, I love how you're getting yourself out there on these interviews. It's awesome. So we just
Hell
gotta
yeah.
keep spreading them.
I just don't want. I don't know. I feel like I need to overcome the barrier. I got to set up my own stuff, and like I gotta do it. I gotta stop just expecting everyone else to give me the platform and just show up like a rock star or something. I gotta actually put my own effort out. I know I'm gonna do it.
We're not guilting you. I'm gonna try to find somebody to redo my website and not use a third party like GoDaddy, because I've already run to I can't even. I'm having problems already. So I'm looking for somebody who can affordably like remake my website. So if I can find someone.
If you find somebody, let me know. Cause I think I have like 55 or 60 videos, like, and they're just all over the place. And like, I just like,
yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, get it something like a link tree or tap link. I don't know if you heard about that, but it's just like a hub to have all these things, and you can actually like plug in every single link to every video you made and just have it, on that one thing. So it's like, hey, all my works are just right here, even if,
Right. Or break
right?
them
So
up by a general topic, like
yeah,
SRA or, porn or whatever. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. It was so nice to meet you.
yeah.
And like, I think you guys are awesome and I love the show. I want to watch more. I watched a couple and I
Likewise,
was like,
yeah.
I love you guys together. Really good. Like, it's a good, I like having a man on too. I feel it's really important right now. Like a lot of the shows I did were with men interviewing me because I was like, I don't just want to seem like a feminist rant. Like I was like, I actually want to have a conversation with men. And so like had a few men actually come on and do the shows with me. And I think it's really powerful having the male and female like conversations. I think that's really cool that you guys are doing the show together and having the two angles on it. So.
Yeah, it's cool. All
Yeah.
righty. Thank
Appreciate
you.
that.
All righty. Well, we're all out
Anyways,
there doing
I
the
take
work.
this guy for a walk. And
Have a good
anytime
afternoon.
you guys, you just send me the link when it's out or whatever.
We will. All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah, much
guys.
love, you. I really appreciate this
You-
conversation. Yeah, ciao.
Yeah,
You
ciao.
too. You too.
Yeah.